2024 Ekbert 23 Deldy 1618. All right, so we've got a bunch of stuff to read. So we gotta stay focused on the reading. Just some things I've got in mind. Well, my dad's coming in less than a week, so he might want to talk about consciousness. I really should just avoid the conversation. But I know that's something on my mind right now as we read. But the main thing I want to work on, no, I don't see how I can get that from the reading. I want to work on Alaris stuff, right? Manalaris. What do you do when you got something you want to evaluate it? I had a question or a debate point. I want to figure out what's going on. I want to concretize some things. Some truthness, some falseness, some fallacy, and Okay, anyway, so but I absolutely have to not speak while we're reading this. And just know that there are going to be some things I disagree with, some things I'll make faces about, some things I'm going to really, really, really love. And but I just have to, and I can make notes and talk about it in another video maybe. But and the reason that I'm not talking, because that's also important to establish, to announce, the reason we're not talking is because not talking. One, you have opportunities to see my videos. This is an opportunity for you to see a nice drive while hearing from Bruce Hood and just a little tiny itsy bitsy bit from Eris. So like, just to relate it back, but how do we limit that? So the focus is Bruce Hood. And then, how do we limit that? I don't know. We had to come back to that. And then 2, gotta read faster. And maybe that's a better way to put it. Use a comparative word rather than saying we gotta get through these books, because I don't think my system is very good with that. Very good with time and the future and stuff. But gotta read faster. That's the present. Okay, I can handle that. Now, I'll still have some trouble focusing, but at least that's actually slapping something. Whereas if it was like, gotta hurry this stuff up, I don't really have a good time system for that to end up really slapping anybody that can get in the fight, you know? Okay. So we've got some gotta read faster. Okay, good. I mean, gotta get through it faster, but gotta read more now. Every moment. Okay. And then maybe what I can do, oh my god, there's a lot of pages taken up for a Yahtzee game we didn't even play. Yeah, it's not a lot, that's okay. Okay, so I have to keep reminding myself of I'm not great with anticipation stuff, but if I try to make it really vivid, the image of having a video online where you can sit down and hear it from Bruce Hood. But of course, you can go to Bruce Hood to hear Bruce Hood. But so we do have to kind of be able to tie it back. Not be able to, but we have to be allowed small opportunities to do that. So how do we limit that? Let's see. We got 2 minutes. Gosh, so it's gotta be practical, but also it's hard for me to know what's practical. I was thinking, oh, but then what if you read one more word and you have to just add a little tiny thing at 2 minutes? Do you get a whole nother 2 minutes? No, certainly not. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Set up a timer on the computer, and while we read, let's at least say the rest of this chapter, we can talk for, what do you think? 4 minutes, it really isn't bad. Let's do 5. I was going to do 5 just because I was in the seconds it was 30. So now I typed in 4 and said 4. I was like, oh, but it's already 4:30. So might as well just make it 5. But I still ended up having to change to 30. Otherwise, I was going to enter into that loop again. I was going to type 5:30 and be like, oh, we might as well do 6. Type 6:30. Might as well. Anyway. All right. So, and then we can take notes here. Okay, reading SelfHood. All right, let's get into it. I've made my vow to you guys. You guys know what's going on. All right, we are reading The Self-Illusion. I forget what year. Hold on. Okay, 2012. That's amazing. Back in 2012. All right. I mean, it's the best I got. You know, it's old, 2012, relatively speaking, especially with the kind of stuff that it's talking about. And at the same time, it's like, come on. Then again, this explains everything. That was 2012 as well, 2013. Oh, all right. Bruce Hood, The Self-Illusion, How the Social Brain Creates Identity. Of course, I take the book about just the self-illusion part. But the subtitle, that's an aspect I underestimate in the book, or a theme, or a takeaway. That there's no essential identity, that because it's a social brain, a brain that is meant for community and is highly developed, not relative to actual social needs, but I mean relative to other capacities we have and also other species' social capacities. We have a highly developed social capacity, and it's kind of a foundational thing to a lot of our cortical abilities, to a lot of our higher thinking, is the way that it is because of how it serves socializing. So that's what it means by a social brain. Not just a brain that wants socializing, but a brain that is built to socialize, a brain whose functions are as cool as they are as a response to social needs, even not obviously related functions that aren't obviously related to socializing, including which the construction of an identity, which may or may not be obvious. And so because there isn't an essential identity that emerges from the brain, well, the brain constructs an identity, an impermanent identity based on the people around it, social relationships, and then also its means of creating an identity has social objectives. Sorry, what was the first thing I just said? So the material for the construction of the identity, the material used is the fruits of socializing, what people say. Hey, you're this kind of person. Oh, okay. And then our tools, our mechanisms of construction using that material they themselves evolved often for social things. Socializing, being part of a community, is kind of the end goal of the cortex, maybe. Could you say that? It's not rationality. Even our rationality almost serves society, not our individual rationality, but we're not rational. What we're good at is once we have an opinion about something, we're good at coming up with things, finding evidence that supports it, or that at least looks like it supports it. So we're not going to get the truth because that thing might not be true, but we're going to make our case. Somebody else is going to make a case for something else, something. It doesn't matter that all the individuals are wrong. All this information is given to the group. All these different ideas, and then the group, now that has all this information and all these different motivations together, will make a cool decision. The fact that we're part of a community means that we can specialize. The fact that we're part of a community means that we can learn. We don't have to have everything pre-programmed. We can learn an incredible amount of things during our childhood. And so culture can exist. And then the best, all you need is one person to have a good idea. And then the whole community's got the idea. That's not possible without social bonds, of course, socializing, interacting. So ideas become super viral, easy to spread. Of course, we need critical recognition so that there are filters in that spread, looking out for biases and fallacies and stuff like that. Yeah, so the social brain, its goal is to be good at, like, the lower brain systems: eating, shelter, reproduction, fight or flight, threat stuff, aggression, all the stuff that lots and lots of mammals have. That's all the lower brains. And then you got a few species who are social. So they're starting, and then once it became social, boom, we started developing all these capacities. Because a social brain needs all these things in order to be social, and it benefits a great deal from being a part of a greater system. Okay. So even our definition of identity, it's about what is your place in that bigger system. So identity can be defined according to relationships, which is, of course, more common in Eastern cultures than in Western cultures. Sometimes Westerners will do team membership, find themselves according to that, but otherwise they'll talk about certain essential things: my gender, my interests, my abilities, my desires, my interests. But even those things are affected by the people around you, those desires and so on. Hell, even your gender. So there you go. Okay, that's enough of that. Okay, Sorry, we're getting this clock. And that was good. That was the first time I was kind of saying that. Or second time. Well, anyway, I needed to hear it again. All right, I got you. Cool. Cool. So, so you got many capacities that are developed in order so that you can make a good team member, a good contributor to a group. And then in turn, the group covers a lot of cognitive needs. You don't each need to go discover something. One person can discover it, spread the gospel. Sociability is just about being able to add other brains to the network. Of course, that's an enormous thing. Once you're able to go, it's about going online, being able to connect with other devices and, you know, specialize and so on. Have that device do that, or that human do that, blah, blah. So, pretty amazing stuff when it's going from one brain to it mattering what the other brains are doing. And for no species does it matter more to, if you want to understand a human brain, you have to have some understanding of, well, the context and the other human brains around it. And then you could say that's an infinite regress. But, more you know about one brain, more you know about another brain in the same system. And there's no species, probably only a handful of species for whom that's the case. A lot of brains you could probably study somewhat in isolation. You didn't even know about the context, food availability, whatever. But to understand the activity of a human brain, yeah, we're built to be on a network. Yeah. Yeah. Most humans wouldn't even survive by themselves. Because we have specialization. Where I do my thing, someone else is in the community taking care of my other needs. I mean, the rest of the community taking care of my other needs while I'm taking care of this aspect of people's needs. It doesn't always have to be that cut and dried, but that's the idea that ends up happening when you have, a proper community. Of course, we don't under capitalism, but okay. Okay, let's get into it. So, Bruce Hood, 2012, Self-Illusion, How the Social Brain Creates Identity, Chapter 5, Why Our Choices Are Not Our Own. We're on page 157, it says, but I don't really know what, okay. We'll just read through the last 3 paragraphs. Okay. None of this is new. We have known since the days of psychology's early pioneers None of this is new. We have known since the days of psychology's early pioneers, von Helmholtz and more famously Freud, that there are unconscious processes controlling our thoughts and behaviors. What is new is the extent to which these processes are there to protect the self-illusion. The narrative we create that we are the ones making the decisions. This stems from the need to maintain the appearance that we are in control, even when we are not. We are so concerned with maintaining the illusion of the sovereignty of self that we are prepared to argue that black is white just to prove that we are right. This is why we effortlessly and sometimes unknowingly reinterpret our behavior to make it seem that we had deliberately made the choices all along. Misa. We are constantly telling stories to make sense of ourselves. In one study, adults were shown pairs of female faces and asked to choose which was the more attractive of the two women. On some trials, immediately after making their choice, the card with the picture of the chosen woman was held up and the participants were asked to explain why they had chosen her over the other. Was it her hairstyle or color of her eyes? The cunning aspect of the study was that on some of the trials, the experimenter used sleight of hand to switch the cards deliberately so that the participants were asked to justify a choice they hadn't made to support the choice of the woman they had actually just rejected. Not only were most switches undetected, but participants went on to give perfectly lucid explanations for why the woman was so much more attractive than the one they rejected. They were unaware that their choice was not their choice. It works for taste tests as well. When shoppers were asked to sample different jams and teas at a Swedish supermarket, again, the researchers switched the products after the shoppers had selected the flavors they preferred and were asked to describe why they chose one flavor over another. Whether it was a switch from spicy cinnamon apple to sour grape jam, or from sweet mango to pungent Pernod flavored tea, the shoppers detected less than a third of the switches. It would seem that once we have made a preference, we are committed to justifying our decision. This shows just how easy it is to fool ourselves into thinking that our self is in control. As Steven Pinker put it, the conscious mind, self or soul, is a spin doctor, not the commander-in-chief. As Jonathan Haidt put it, it's the rational tail on the intuitive dog. And as I would put it, there's no dog, there's no commander-in-chief. Having been presented with a decision, we then make sense of it as if it were our own. Otherwise, it would suggest that we don't know what we are doing, which is not something that most of us would readily admit. Sour grapes. That we can so readily justify our choices is at the heart of one of the ancient world's best-known stories about our necessity to spin a story. One day, a hungry fox came across a bunch of grapes that hung high on a vine, but despite repeated leaping attempts to reach them, the fox was unable to dislodge the grapes. I acted this out for the cognitive dissonance chapter. Defeated, he left, saying that he did not want them anyway, because they were sour. He had changed his mind. Whenever we talk disparagingly about something that we initially wanted but did not get, we are said to be displaying sour grapes. It's very common. How often have we all done this when faced with the prospect of loss? Consider all those job interviews that you failed to get. Remember those dates that went disastrously wrong or the competition you entered and lost? We console ourselves with the excuse that we did not want the job anyway, the other person was a jerk, or that we were not really trying to win. We may even focus on the negative aspects of being offered the job, getting a kiss, or winning the competition. But we are conning ourselves. Why do we do this? Who would have thought that a Greek slave born over 2,500 years ago would have produced some of the most enduring commentaries on the human condition through his storytelling, which preempted recent theories in cognitive science? Forgot that was a question. Remarkably, Aesop's fables about animals behaving like humans endure not only because they are immediately accessible metaphors for the vagaries of human behavior, but they also speak to fundamental truths. In the case of the fox and the sour grapes, Aesop is describing cognitive dissonance, one of the major psychological mechanisms discovered and researched over the last 50 years that has generated an estimated 3,000 plus studies. Cognitive dissonance, a term coined by Leon Festinger in 1957, is the process of self-justification where we defend our actions and thoughts when they turn out to be wrong, or in the case of the sour grapes, ineffectual. We interpret our failure to attain a goal as actually turning out to be a good thing because, with hindsight, we reinterpret the goal as not really desirable. Otherwise, we are faced with the prospect that we have wasted a lot of work and effort to no avail. This discrepancy creates the cognitive dissonance. It's a dissonance because, on the one hand, we believe that we are generally pretty successful at attaining our goals. On the other hand, we were unsuccessful at achieving this particular goal. This is the dissonance aspect of our reasoning, the unpleasant mental discomfort we experience. To avoid the conflict this dissonance creates, we reinterpret our failure as success. We tell ourselves that the goal was actually not in our best interests. Job done, no worries. Freud similarly talked about defense mechanisms, italicized, that we use to protect the self-illusion. However, the self-illusion sometimes has to reconcile incongruent thoughts and behaviors. For example, I may consider myself to be a good person, but then have bad thoughts about someone. That is inconsistent with my good self story, so I employ defense mechanisms. I may rationalize my thoughts by saying that the person is actually bad, and I am justified in my negative attitude toward them. Perversely, I may do the opposite and go out of my way to think of them positively as a compensation for my unconscious negativity in what Freud called, italicized, reaction formation. Or, I may protect my negative feelings about a person, or I may project my negative feelings about a person onto their pet dog and blame the poor mutt for my reasons of dislike. Did I say protect again? I don't think so. In any case. Or I may project my negative feelings about a person onto their pet dog and blame the poor mutt for my reasons of dislike when it is actually his owner I despise. All of these are examples of why we try to reframe the unpleasant feelings that we have towards someone in order to maintain our valued sense of self, a self that is not unduly or unfairly judgmental of others. It is worth pointing out that not only can justification happen at the level of the self, it can also happen at the level of groups. Probably the best recent example, 2012, is the justification for the Iraq War on the basis of the alleged threat from weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. The British general public was told that Saddam Hussein had missiles that could reach the mainland within the infamous 45-minute warning. The nation was shocked. Despite repeated assurance by United Nations inspection teams that there was no evidence for such WMDs, we were told that they were there and that we had to invade. Scottish author. After the invasion, and once it was clear that there were no WMDs, the instigators had to justify their actions. We were told that the invasion was necessary on the grounds that Saddam Hussein is an evil dictator who needed to be removed from power, even though such regime change was in violation of international law. We were told that if he did not have WMDs before, then he was planning on making them. The invasion was justified. We had been saved. It would appear that modern politicians do not need a thick skin so much as a carefully crafted capacity for mass cognitive dissonance. Or, as I would say, mass cognitive dissonance resolution. I feel like he kind of equivocated on what cognitive dissonance is whether it's the resolution of cognitive dissonance or it's the disparity itself. Cognitive dissonance protects the self from conflicting stories and is at the heart of why the self-illusion is so important. But it also reveals the dangers that a strong sense of self can create. We use it to justify faulty reasoning. Although we do not appreciate it, our decision making is actually a constellation of many processes vying for our attention and in constant conflict. We fail to consider just how much of our decision making is actually, my quotes, out of our control. Section: The Monty Hall Problem. There are essentially two problems with decision making. Either we ignore external information and focus on our own perspective, or we fail to realize the extent to which our own perspective is actually determined by external influences. In both cases, we are fools to believe that our self is making decisions independent of the external context. This can lead to some wondrous distortions of human reason. My quotes, distortions of human reason. Consider an egocentric bias that blinds us to important changes in the world when it comes to decision making. If you have not already heard of it, one other note, a lot of the research that this is based on, basically every good psychology book of the last 20 years, or even the last 10, um, um, a lot of them were written before we realized the replicability crisis in psychology. And now that we've realized it, a lot of research in cognitive psychology has come under question. Just leave it at that. And you can, if I say something super interesting about a study, look it up, see what's been happening with replication efforts. Okay, let's get into the Monty Hall. Let me introduce you to the Monty Hall problem. The problem is named after the presenter of the American game show Let's Make a Deal, where the climax was to choose a prize from behind one of three doors. Try to imagine yourself in this situation. You have made it all the way through to the final of the show and have a chance of winning the jackpot. Behind two doors are booby prizes, but behind one door is a fabulous prize. For the sake of argument, let's say that is an expensive Ferrari. You hesitate initially and then choose door A. The host of the show, Monty, says, "You chose door A, but let me show you what's behind door C." He then opens door C to reveal one of the booby prizes. Monty says, "You chose door A initially, but do you want to change your decision to door B?" What should you do? Most people who encounter this problem for the very first time think that it makes no difference because they reason that it is a 50-50 chance to win the Ferrari with only two doors left to choose from. Indeed, people are reluctant to change their minds once they have made a choice. Some may say that we stubbornly stick with our decisions because we have the courage of our convictions. After all, it is important to be decisive. What do you think you should do? Switch or stick? I'll let you give two answers. One, what do you really think that you should do? And then two, okay, it's a trick question. So your answer number two will be to, oh no, just either way. So switch or stick, or does it make no difference? Carrying on. If you don't already know, the correct answer is to switch. But if you don't know why, it is incredibly hard to understand. The Monty Hall problem has become a somewhat famous cognitive illusion, appearing both in best-selling books and even in the Hollywood movie 21 in 2008. About a bunch of mathematically minded Massachusetts Institute of Technology students who counted cards at the blackjack tables of Las Vegas to beat the casinos. The correct solution to the Monty Hall problem is to switch because you are more likely to win than if you stick with your first choice. It is difficult to see at first, but when it initially appeared in the popular magazine Parade in 1990, the problem created a storm of controversy and disagreement among both the general public and experts. Over 10,000 people, 1,000 with doctoral degrees, wrote in complaining that the switch decision was false. The reason you should switch is that when you first choose a door, you have a chance of 1 out of 3 that you are correct. 1 out of 3 chance that you got the Ferrari. Now, after Monty has revealed one of the booby prizes, with 2 doors left, the remaining that you did not select has a 2 out of 3 chance, which is better odds than the door that you first chose, which remains as 1 out of 3. Remember, Monty always shows you an empty door. Simple, except that it is not simple for most people. Look, an easier way to solve the Monty Hall problem is to consider a variation in which there are 100 doors instead of 3. Again, you get to pick 1 door. Now Monty opens 98 of the remaining 99 doors to show you that they are all empty. There are now only 2 remaining unopened doors. Would you switch now? Here we can see that our door is unlikely to be the correct one. What are the odds that I correctly selected the right door on my first chance? Actually, it's odds of 100 to 1 to be precise. That's why we immediately twig that Monty is up to no good. There is something deeply counterintuitive about the Monty Hall problem, which reflects our limited capacity to think outside of the box, or to be more precise, to think in an unselfish way. Ooh, we're going to use a little bit of time here. That last line, super important. So being a social brain, a lot of our cognitive processes, and we've seen this in the book Rationality by Steven Pinker, where whenever he makes like the probability problems or the whole thing about the like the conjunction stuff with the flipping a card and stuff, when he made it about people, there were mechanisms that are only engaged for social situations, which were able to help with the problem solving. So remember with the vaccine thing in the Rationality book, understanding why it was only a 9% chance that the patient had breast cancer given the positive test, and then the other percentages that were given, the commonness and all of that, it wasn't intuitive until he said, okay, now imagine 100 women. And he said, forget the generic a woman, blah, 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 and the percentage of chances, blah, blah. Just imagine 100 women. And then he walked through it. Or when he did the thing with flipping, as far as like, oh gosh, what was it? When you have a conditional rule, like if A or B, then C. And intuitively, it's hard to know what to check to see if at least one of the conditions is met. Gosh, you got to go back to that chapter. But then when he made it a thing about cheating, where the consequences are, if you don't check it properly, then somebody's going to get away with cheating, all of a sudden these other mechanisms get involved. And you know exactly what to check. Remember with the stamps thing? It was like, you need to have this kind of stamp on this envelope, and you need to check 2 things, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, when it was the stamp thing and there was worry about cheating, oh yeah, and then people were figuring it out. And so this is interesting because this is such a bypass, I think. I don't think I really understand the Monty Hall problem. I have explanations that work for me, but I still feel unsatisfied. Now, maybe it's just because it is counterintuitive. And so you just need to know your intuition's going to be setting off alarms. But can you explain it, even if you feel unsatisfied? And yeah, I can explain it. But also, this feels just like such a bypass, which is kind of how the brain works in shortcuts. Um, shit. Well, I'll just say I have to stop reading for a while. Yeah. Which is kind of how the brain works in shortcuts. We have 8 seconds. So basically, rather than like actually understanding the probability, the clue here, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. The clue here, and I'm gonna let you go 2 seconds. Fuck, stop. The clue here is is this theory of mind, this deception thing, this Monty Hall wanted to show me all of the doors except for the one that I selected and one other. He knows where the bogus prize is and the good prize is. So he's looking and he's going, which doors am I going to open to reveal to him? And he's only going to open bogus and empty doors. And let's say they all have bogus stuff except for the one with the Ferrari. So he's going to open only bogus doors. So when you think about it that way, I don't know that you really understand the problem, but you get there and understanding, oh yeah, I should definitely switch. Because he skipped over this door. But that's like a fallacy. To see that pattern, to assume intention and stuff is actually a fallacy that we have because we are a social brain that we often apply to non-social questions. For instance, I don't know, in our different patternicity, we tend to think that choices, that if things are bundled, then it must not, if you show people a plot of points and there's a concentration of points, so that's not random because someone was like putting points over there. That was their intention, put like points over there. They had a theme, they had intention, that's what they were doing. So those points are there because they had that intention. But no, in fact, it's only when you program a computer to make a non-random appearing sequence that people will even believe it's random. Otherwise, they'll be able to find patterns in it and they'll think that those mean intention. And so when we see all these doors get opened except for one, we go, oh, okay. So we imagine that he opened that door. Maybe he saw there's the prize. He skipped over it. So because we tell ourselves that story, we're like, oh, I want that. But that's a fallacy. That by itself is not logical. Now, if you add in the fact that the actual odds that you chose the right door at first are pretty low. Because basically what it was is, here's the math of it. Here's how you look at the math of it. All right, so you had 3 options, right? Each one 33% chance of being the Ferrari. Okay, 2 of them are garbage. Okay. Now, if you choose a door, okay, now let's look at the question. Let's not look at your door, but let's look at your choice. Let's phrase it that way. You have a 33% chance that your choice is correct and a 66% chance that your choice is wrong. And this is not going to be using a social it. I mean, maybe an it that evolved for socializing. But in any case, this explanation doesn't use that it. He said here, Bruce said, that's why we immediately twig that Monty is up to no good. But if we ignore that piece, all right, so your choice is, there's a 33% chance that your choice is good, 66% chance your choice is false, because in that 6% chance are two doors, each of them being 33% chance true, 33 and 33, 66, okay. So we're not thinking about doors, though. We're thinking about your choice, but we are remembering that your choice is the sum of doors. The thing you didn't choose is two doors. The thing you did choose is one door. Now, wouldn't it be cool if you could choose two doors? That would be a 66% chance. If your Ferrari is behind either of the two doors, whoa, that's great. Okay, well, keeping that in mind, he opens one of the other two doors. Garbage behind it. Now remember that those other two doors, that represented a 66% chance. He just opened one of those and showed you there's garbage. Your choices are still 33% chance that your choice was already correct and 66% that it was wrong. Well, if you change your mind, then it will be a 66% chance that you're right and a 33% chance that you're wrong. Before that, it wasn't possible to have a 66% chance because you can't choose two doors. But you don't need to, because he already opened one of the doors for you, so you can just invest all your 66% into that third door. Now, once you understand that, you're still going to go, but what if it had just like been the opposite, blah, blah. Yeah, but Monty knows which one. But yes, if it was behind that door C, he opened door B, you switched to B and C. But of course, you didn't open B because he already showed it to you. You opened C, and there's the Ferrari. 60% chance is not 100% chance, right? So yeah, if in reality the Ferrari is behind that, go back in time, and you choose door C to begin with, and then you switch. Yeah, okay, you missed out on the Ferrari. But here's the thing: it's about being able to choose two doors. And you can't do that. But if you know what one of the doors is, and you pair that with another door, and you choose the second door, that pair is basically choice of two doors. That's great. (2024) Ekber 23 Delhi 1713. There is something deeply counterintuitive about the Monty Hall problem, which reflects our limited capacity to think outside of the box, or to be more precise, to think in an unselfish way. Another reason that people fail to switch in the Monty Hall problem is a general bias not to tempt fate. When it comes to making decisions, inherently we fear loss greater than we value the prospect of a win. Is that prospect theory? Despite the so-called rationality, my quotes, of the modern era, people still think that if they change their decision, then there is more chance that they will regret doing so. It's not so much stubbornness or superstition, but rather that we fear loss greater than the potential for gains. Rather than fear, we can just simply say we averse loss. For example, the social psychologist Ellen Langer of Xerox machine fame sold $1 lottery tickets to 53 office workers. Each stub of the ticket was put into a box from which one lucky winner would receive the whole $53. Just before the lottery draw, a couple of days later, Ellen approached each worker and asked each person for how much he would sell his ticket. If they had just been handed a ticket by the experimenter, so they had exercised no choice. If they had just been handed a ticket by the experimenter, so they had exercised no choice, the average price for resale is $2. But if they had chosen the ticket themselves, it was $8. Moreover, 10 of the choosers and 5 of the non-choosers refused to sell their ticket. It turns out that it is the fear of regret that looms large in our minds. How many times have you deliberated over an expensive purchase only to hear the salesperson reassure you, "Go on, you'll not regret it"? We're probably wondering, well, how about why isn't it the prospect of the gain of the $53 that we are avanting? And the reason we're thinking that is because maybe we didn't understand something, or we're not realizing something. Because I think he would have explained it, but I think we're supposed to understand that. We see how it's aversing loss. I may regret that I gave up my chance to win $53. But what if it's the prospect of getting the $53? Anyway, we're humble readers, so we assume that. But if that's something super duper interesting to you, investigate it. Section, Risky Analysis. What the Monty Hall problem illustrates so clearly is the limitations of human reasoning, especially when it comes to probability. Probability is all about external information. Reasoning in terms of probable outcomes is very difficult because most of us think in a very self-centered way. We make decisions from our own perspective and often fail to take into consideration the external information that is most relevant. In fact, most complex science is based on probabilities and not absolute known truths about the universe. After the age of Newton and the scientific revolution of the 17th century, it was assumed that the universe was one big clockwork mechanism that could be understood by measurement and prediction. It was thought that if we improved the accuracy of our measurements, then we would understand better how the universe worked. The opposite happened. The universe became more complex. With increasing efficiency, we discovered that the universe was much messier than we had previously imagined. There was more noise in the system and less certainty. This noise gave birth to the age of statistical modeling, in which mathematicians tried to discover the workings of the universe using procedures that accounted as best as possible for all the variation that was observed. This is why the language of science is mathematics, and its truths are based on probabilities. Very good. Unfortunately, statistical analysis is not natural for the average man in the street. Our bodies and brains, for that matter, may operate in statistically predictable ways, but few of us explicitly understand statistical principles. This is why the general audience gets so frustrated when they hear scientists in the media refusing to give a straight yes or no answer to the questions that concern them. They want to know what to do about global warming. No way, that's Morocco? That's so cool! No way, that's not Morocco, is it? Wow. Let's just read that again. This is why the language of science is mathematics and its truths are based on probabilities. It's just too messy for absolute truth and human brains. It's too messy for yeah. External absolute truths are too messy for the human brain. Too many things that can go wrong. Too many ways we can misinterpret. And also too difficult to study the external world. So we use probability, statistical modeling, confidence levels, p-values, standard deviations. Okay, excellent. So, yeah. And just this person I keep blocking, I had said to her that, because she was like, how can science affirm that there's no, I don't remember what we're talking about, consciousness, God, soul, I don't know. And one of my responses was to say, we're not. I mean, here are the reasons we are, but also, we're not. Science doesn't confirm. Oh, that's so cool! I don't know whether you guys can see it. It kind of looks blown out, maybe. Wow, that's a whole nother continent, bro. I don't think I've ever seen a separate continent. I never looked from one continent to see another, ever, in my life. I don't think. Science doesn't affirm negatives. But another way of responding to it is science works in probabilities. So we affirm positives. Maybe it'll be a 97% thing on some scale of affirmation. Then that 3% is that negative possibility. But what we're interested in is what the information about the world around us shows us, what conclusions it leads us to, or the conclusions that seem 97% worthwhile. 97% guarantee, 60% guarantee. This is good. This is working. And when you follow the evidence from the world, you can only end up with sort of positive, and then that's what you can affirm. You can't go study a tree and discover, oh, there isn't a branch here. But you can discover, oh, there's 97% chance of a branch here, 97% chance of a branch here, 97% chance there's a branch here, 3% chance there isn't. And let's say we've got no reason to speak about a branch between those two there that you're asking me about. Got nothing in, we have no ability to affirm it's positive. If you want to take that as affirming the negative, because it's simpler, okay. But all we're saying is we've got no reason to go above 0 for the chance of that being there. Nothing, no information has pushed us into, proper digits, counting numbers. This is why the general audience gets so frustrated when they hear scientists in the media refusing to give a straight yes or no answer to the questions that concern them. They want to know what to do about global warming, the dangers associated with childhood vaccination, or how to prevent pandemic viruses. When answering, scientists talk in terms of probabilities rather than absolute certainties, because they look at the big picture, in which they know there is going to be some variation. That's not what the general public wants to hear. They want to know whether vaccination will harm their children. They are less interested in the group, because that is not the way individuals think. Not very social brain. They're less interested in the group, because that is not the way individuals think. They want to know about their case. Sure. That's not very social brain. The other problem with probability is that humans have not evolved to consider likelihood based on large amounts of data. Rather, we operate with heuristics, fast and dirty rules of thumb that generally serve us well. Rather, we operate with heuristics, fast and dirty rules of thumb that generally serve us well. The German psychologist Gerd Rove has argued that humans have not evolved to work out probabilities such as those operating in the Monty Hall problem. We focus on the task as relevant to ourself and how it applies to an individual basis rather than on populations of people. We tend to only evaluate our own choices, not what is best for the group. Faced with two doors, my chances seem even, like only when I am faced with two doors 100 times, or 100 different people taking the Monty Hall challenge, that the patterns become obvious. We tend to only evaluate our own choices, not what is best for the group. Faced with two doors, my chances seem even. It's only when I am faced with two doors 100 times, or 100 different people taking the Monty Hall challenge, that the pattern becomes obvious. We don't think about the trend, think about the individual case. So we don't think about the trend, and we don't think about the population cases. We don't think about the trend in terms of probability, in terms of time, and also in terms of the sample, you know what I tried to say. We often do not know the true incidence of an event, but rather guess at this figure based on whatever evidence we can accumulate. This is where all sorts of distortions in reasoning start to appear. In weighing up the evidence, we easily overestimate or underestimate risks based on the external information. For example, people's naive estimates related to dying in airplane crashes are inflated because we tend to judge the occurrence of such events as more common than they truly are. These are called dread risks, okay, or the salience effect. These are called dread risks, and they attract more salience because they are so uncommon. It's not surprising considering the dramatic coverage such tragedies generate. We focus on them and imagine what it must be like to die in such a helpless way. We attach more weight to these thoughts than we should because they are novel and draw our attention. I have 9 seconds. This is not being effective, but it can be. I just got to stick to it, or I don't know. But so far, I'm happy with what I've said. So this is the whole thing with it theory. Let's go back to that last sentence. Shut the fuck up. Rather, we operate with heuristics. Fast and dirty rules of thumb that generally serve us well. All right, first things first, let me add. That generally served us well during our adapted period and for past demand periods that we adapted to, for the expectations that we have. I've said that in 100 videos. Okay. Secondly, the times that they don't serve us well are enormously exacerbated because we don't recognize that they only generally serve us well. So we don't catch those times because of our arrogance. Then we put our foot down on those times, and we don't even realize that it's arrogance because it feels completely justified. And it seems completely justified. Okay, so that's the things I want to add. Now, that is it theory, okay? In one sentence, we operate with heuristics, fast and dirty rules of thumb that generally serve us well. Got it on the head. A lot of psychology books do. Ones that follow Kahneman. Now, here's the problem. They add in this other rational conscious entity. They talk about how its rationality is limited because of the presence of all of these heuristics. And we got this image of this one self that is able to get engaged and be rational and all of this, and then it has like maybe, I guess, a brain, and that brain is neurons connected in ways that we can call shortcuts, fast and dirty rules of thumb, heuristics meaning shortcuts or rules of thumb. Right. So you can't program reason, can't program truth, but what you can program is a way to handle input and produce output that's generally good, that generally works in your favor, that keeps the genes going. Okay? People just aren't ready yet, but it's coming. It's happening, sort of. People aren't quite ready to say, oh, but that's all that I am, these heuristics. But there isn't this other I next to it, capable of perfect reason and all the things that we imagine. It's not like we have deep critical thinking and then we have shortcuts. Now, there is a spectrum. The more a given shortcut is interacting with other shortcuts, and the later in the reflection a shortcut is happening, so how much after certain evaluations have already been done, the better and less shortcutty it is, of course, right? So a system 2 shortcut, which is just, a connection, a way of treating information and producing output that's not too bad. To it, well, there's a whole series of things that happened before it was activated. A whole antilivery. It's kit to a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of information competing and other its. So now you've got something that could on the whole look quite reasonable, that particular it. Whoa, it's taking in account that information, and it seems to be assigning the right weights, and it's producing a behavior that is pretty good, or an answer that's pretty good. But it's the sum of many shortcuts, of many imitators, of many imitations of reason. It's not that one it's the whole antilivery, the whole series, all the weighing operations that happened. None of them inherently reasonable, but if we're alive, that's because we're the descendants of people for whom it worked well enough. Okay, that's it theory. That you are a bunch of its. Okay. And these its can be referred to as heuristics, but then when you realize that there isn't like a longer process, it kind of feels weird to refer to them as heuristics. But yeah, just its. If, then, IT, input, output, right? Okay. And so that, in one sentence, it theory is that the mind and all our intelligence and all of that is just the sum of a whole bunch of rules of thumb. A rule of thumb: in this situation, do this. When you see this, know this, right? So if, then. So our mind and all the amazing things that it can do is ultimately the sum of a whole bunch of fast and dirty rules of thumb. But they get a little cleaner as it works up its way up the hierarchy by just, you got a little impression here, a little impression here, through the competition of these two its in the summit, right? They're going to win out. One of them's going to win out and ecliver. Through that that was a little cleanliness, because this dude was real dirty. He didn't get to continue, right? And maybe this guy was kind of dirty, but he was a little bit mitigated by this guy, right? But it's still not perfectly organized or weighted. So sometimes this very dirty rule of thumb does ecliver, because, Mother Nature did the best she can, does ecliver. And then that's when you got a lot of our crazy behaviors every single day and all the time, or and that we don't even notice are crazy. Um, to have a reasonable system, every single you would need complete calibration, 100%. You even have one thing miscalibrated, one weight is off, and that's gonna lead to less than perfect results, right? Well, uh, we have like cartoon stick figure versions of rationality in here. Things that, okay, well, yeah, but 70% of the time that's going to be the right answer. Okay, my method was totally off, but it was fast, and yes, it was dirty, but it was quick and easy, energy efficient. Uh, what was I saying? Shit, what was I saying? Shit, what was I saying? Fuck. Quick and fast and dirty. You are the sum of these its, if then. Oh, a rational system would have to be perfectly weighted. Right. And the weight from any prior process was going to have an effect on something else, right? So if you try to imagine like a network, I know this should be another video. I'm sorry. I am sorry. Actually, I don't want viewers. Cognitive dissonance. So no, this is good. So um, if are you picturing like a domino series? Okay. Um. Um. I have to continue to do my brilliant things because I haven't gotten to weighted artificial neural networks yet. All right, look. Point is, imagine a tree. Um, or no. Okay. Imagine a really, really complicated network of assembly lines. Okay. So imagine tons of assembly lines, each lined with workers. And there are lots of nodes of interconnection and okay. So just like a web of assembly lines. Um, let's imagine a direction to it though. So let's not imagine like a web of assembly lines. Let's just fucking let's imagine it all culminates in one guy. It's one guy at the end of an assembly line. And if you follow the assembly lines from his perspective, they keep branching off and branching off. Got me? Okay, that's the output side, right? Now let's go to the input side. So you've got tons of these little fingers of different assembly lines. Okay. And as you get close to the output, it's only one guy at the output, only one product that sort of makes it to the output. So a whole bunch of stuff gets in, some stuff gets put on this belt, some stuff gets put on this belt, the starting point of this belt, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then the assembly line thing, there are rules to it. Okay. For instance, if two packages arrive at a node, and the contents of one package, or you just send down the contents of the heavier package. Okay, some nodes, they just send down the contents of the lighter package. Some nodes, they just send the contents of the bigger package. Now, some nodes are a little bit more specific. Um, like, gosh. or some nodes will combine the packages, but they'll take like 30% of what was in this box and 70% of what was in this box and send that on, okay? So each node has rules for the treatment of information, if then. Okay, the treatment of information, that's what rationality is the perfectly correct treatment of information. Because to be the correct treatment of information, every step along the way has to be perfect, because if even one of these nodes produces a bad package, the weight is a little bit off. They think that they're supposed to put 10% of what's in that box and 90% of this other box. But remember, it was 30-70. Instead, they put 10-90. Now, what they send off, their output, their equilivery, is the antilivery. So the next is the input to the next guy. So even if the next guy's rules are perfect, it says, okay, I take 95% of this package and 5% of that other package, and I put them together and send my box on. And even if it does that perfectly, that 95% thing that it took was itself flawed, right? So you can imagine it like an assembly, right? So we should always make our metaphors social. Okay, so if you imagine, what a shame that what social is, a factory industrial assembly line. Great. Anyway, so if you imagine that, can we do it's a cake making process. So there's an assembly line that starts, you put a chicken on it. Another assembly line that starts, you put some dirt on it and some seeds for some wheat or whatever. And we're talking the very bottom, right? And then all these things are happening, and then the ingredients are put together at these different nodes. And I guess we don't have to go all the way bottom. We can just go to right before they start getting combined. So anyway, so you got to put this amount of with this amount of this. Got to put them together, and you send it out. Okay. So if any one of the nodes is wrong, I guess it's tricky because with a cake, like it's okay if you mess it up a little bit, right? But let's imagine the cake that's on the box. Okay, not the photo. Okay, the cake that the chef herself would make, the one who made this recipe, that taste profile. Imagine we have perfect taste and all of that. Okay, that cake can only be made with the exact timing and proportions. You know. So if you get it even slightly off at any part of the process, it's going to be a different profile. Okay. Is there multiple realizability with cognitive processes? Okay, yes, but let's pretend I don't, because I don't know what to do with that right now. So that's why I'd say it's impossible to be reasonable. But the real thing is that the brain just evolved to make a cake that tastes good enough for very different judges than there are today. The judges were like, is this going to poison me? And is this an aphrodisiac? That was it. Now, we're trying to make cakes to answer all kinds of hard questions, like, candidates and all that stuff. Anyway, so we'll get a cake, but we don't even have judges installed that can. Gosh, the judge has equivocated in the metaphor. On one hand, it was the sort of demands of society, and so we produce insufficient things to meet those demands. But I guess it's just, yeah. But no, for a lot of people, it's straight up just no good. They just can't meet the demands of modern society. Their cake is just not what they're looking for. And in any case, everybody, if you actually put a rational and moral judge in front of it, the cake would taste terrible. All of our cake. But we're pretty sympathetic with ourselves. Well, for people we agree with. And I'm like, oh, this is good, yeah, because this is the kind of cake I had, whatever. I don't know. Okay. So that is a theory. We are these small little the sum of each of these fast and dirty rules of thumb, heuristics. And those heuristics, we can think of those as the atoms, but then we realize, oh, you know what's interesting? Let's look inside the atom. And we see the atom's made up of two parts, if, then. And we realize, well, of course it is, because a heuristic, it's what to do, that's the output, in a certain situation or given certain information. So every heuristic, it's an if-then. And that little thing, that if-then, taking in this and producing this, that little thing, that little rule of thumb, if blank, then blank. Then you get billions of them, depending on how you define them and categorize them. But and that is us. And that is what a philosopher, a psi philosopher, that's what I can affirm. I can affirm that that is happening, that these rules of thumb exist. Now, you want to ask me about consciousness, about a soul. I just have nothing putting me into counting numbers regarding the percentage probability of that. And your testimony and your illusions aren't budging the needle. What I can tell you is we've discovered neurons and how changes to them changes function. And we've discovered our treatments of information. We call them heuristics. The ones that are not quite great, we also call them biases or fallacies or illusions. And that's what I can affirm. I have yet to find the non-heuristics. I see how a heuristic might look like it's not a heuristic because it's so complicated that it is kind of clean. It takes in a bunch of stuff. There's a whole nuanced antilivery. So yeah. So that's. But it's still, if I have that nuanced antilivery, then this, and then it just does that. If then, automatic. And because it generally served us well. I don't remember. I think I stopped in 10, but I should let you go by. Maybe one thing that's good about speed limits, and one thing that may be really clever about the fact that that sometimes you'll have like 100-meter stretch where the speed limit increases 30 kilometers an hour, and then at the end of it, like, it was 50. You hit a speed limit sign, it's 80, and then, or maybe it was 60, you hit a speed limit sign, it goes up to 80, and 100 meters later it drops down to 50. What's clever about that, maybe, if that's intentional, or if the intention, because I don't know what the intention is, but here's one possible intention, is that you have to just pay more attention. Having signs on the road, it makes it less easy, it makes it harder to zone out. More signs on the road makes it harder to zone out. Of course, there's a limit. If you have too many, then it's stupid again. Or then you just, because you can't look at them all. But the more you have where you can still look at them all without exhausting yourself, the more you keep system 2 engaged. what I can do is a compilation of moments where I talked. That's what I could do. But I need some kind of a symbol. I think it'll be the finger up. 2024 Acro 23 Delta 1748. See, I need another brain here. I can't function by myself. I can't give you what you want as far as just reading, but I can, reduce a little bit, but not as much as you want. So you need to adjust those expectations and just enjoy the ride. But we are going to keep trying. All right. But that was pretty good, I think. I know there's a lot of repetition, but it was also lots of different ways of saying the same thing. And that's just part of how we learn things. Because there are some its that will only get slapped by hearing certain words. And so to understand a concept, you got to have a whole bunch of different references to it, avenues to it, because if you only talk about it in one context, then only its that get slapped by that context are processing the thing. If you move context, and we talked about this in the beginning of the drive, or at least in the beginning of my recording today, change the context, get this guy involved. Whoa, now you got these guys both working on the problem. Just the way it is, when we have critical recognition, we understand that not all of your cognitive mechanisms get involved all the time. They need to be activated. They're its. They're if-then. So that if has to appear. Okay. All right. The other problem with probability is that humans have not evolved to consider likelihood based on large amounts of data. Rather, we operate... All right. Today, two things. We only have two things to accomplish. One, go to a fucking pharmacy and don't take any shit from them when they say, oh, we need this Spanish thing, blah, blah, blah. No. Call your local hospital then. No. That's bullshit, they told me. Alright, the other problem with probability is that humans have not evolved to consider likelihood based on large amounts of data. Rather, we operate with heuristics, fast and dirty rules of thumb that generally serve us well. The German psychologist Gerd Gorer has argued that humans have not evolved to work out probabilities such as those operating the Monty Hall problem. We focus on the task as relevant to ourself and how it applies on an individual basis rather than on populations of people. We tend to only evaluate our own choices, not what is best for the group. Faced with two doors, my chances seem even. It's only when I am faced with two doors 100 times... Oh, no, we're well ahead of this. Okay, so then we talked about the salience effect from drug risks. This inaccurate risk assessment can be potentially dangerous because we may be tempted to change our behavior patterns based on faulty reasoning. For example, an analysis of road traffic accidents for cars traveling to New York in the 3 months following 9/11 showed an increase in fatalities over expected numbers showed an increase in fatalities over expected numbers for that time of year in the build-up to Christmas. In fact, the excess number was greater than the total number of airline passengers killed on that fateful day. For example, an analysis of road traffic accidents for cars traveling to New York in June, July, and August 2001 showed an increase in fatalities over expected numbers for that time of the year in the build-up to Christmas. Build-up to Christmas? Now, does he think that 9/11 is November 9th? What is he talking about, the build-up to Christmas? Man, he didn't have an editor. I think... So these systems that humans create are supposed to help them. But sometimes, of course, when systems are new or when systems apply to situations, we didn't really evolve to handle the sort of levels of systems that we have or the size of them. as in, a country of 50 million even people. So that's one reason it's going to be bad. Now we can learn, which is why it's not everything's on fire, I guess. And so, we're, even if we didn't evolve to do that, we're pretty good at adapting in certain ways, but obviously not great if you look at the world. And then also, if you look at the fact that I think that if people had the choice, the option between, I think there are a lot of people that were sort of really messed up by the system, right? Certainly the justice system has ruined a lot of lives. Sure, it's helped with a lot of lives as well. But the idea is that it's supposed to be a great thing because it helps. Because there's an unequivocal net benefit. And I think there are groups for whom it is not an unequivocal net benefit. Ideally, it would be an unequivocal net benefit for each individual. You wouldn't have people getting absolutely fucked and other people benefiting greatly. That would be ideal. Now, if we had to sacrifice a few people, okay. But when you start having a group or a culture or anything like that who has a net loss with the system, that's super problematic. Because that means that, real work needs to be done. Okay, well, and of course that's what we're doing, and this is all part of the process. And I have to remind myself of that. It's not what I'm saying right now. It's not something I want to change. It's, I hope, the next step. I mean, it's a change for the future. It's not, oh fuck, it's so terrible. It's like that now. But no, we need to though evolve to this, move to the point where people don't have to sort of be in the system. I don't know. It's hard. It is hard. But somebody will figure something out. It's not obvious. I can't think of anything right now. I mean, like, roads is one thing. How do you... You're going to have to use the roads. If you use the roads, speed limits are because you don't know this road. And so speed limits are meant to be, ideally, sort of calculated based on what is safe for this road. And, if you don't know the road, then blah, blah. Now, wow, that was really cool. Now, what was I about to say? Where was I? Where I felt like, in Germany, right, in Germany, they tend to not have speed limits. I was somewhere where I just felt like there were so many local roads. There weren't any buildings, but but it was a ton of speed limits. Anyway, my point was just that, you can have... Yeah, okay, so the roads that are bridging communities, the roads frequented by people who don't know those roads, in fact, the excess number was greater than the total number of airline passengers killed on that fateful day. Wow, so you got 3,000 people killed. 3,000. And normally, let's say, you have 5,000 people die in the summer from auto accidents. Then you had 8,000 die before 9/11. Individuals frightened of flying to New York overestimated. Following 9/11, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. My apologies to the editor. Okay. Okay. This inaccurate, hold on. What was I gonna say? Never mind. Forget it. Oh. So there's no such, there's no need to say faulty reasoning. It's it-toning. We should have a word for this. It's imitating. It imitates reason. It's itting. It's imiting. To imit is the system's reasoning. It has rules of thumb that approximate reasonable processes. Okay. Emitting. Emitting. Don't love it. When you resist something, that's when you change the system. You change someone's mind. What do we call? Oh, livering. Yeah, liberation. That's what it is. Liberation is deliberation. It's the processes in the mind of the it's livering. That's what liver means, for an it to engage. Okay. So so our livering is what it is. Okay. It's not like it's reasoning, but then it's faulty. No, it's the sum of heuristics, of rules of thumb. And of course, it's not as good as a reasonable system. We can't call it faulty. That's not what it is. It's not a reasonable system. It's an imitation. It's not like the default is reason. You feel me? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have to fucking say it. So then what we have mallets and bonnets. Okay. So a mallet is an it that is not actually well adapted to the situation. So it livers, produces maybe the X livery, but gosh darn, it shouldn't have actually livered. It is not adapted to the situation. That was not appropriate. I apologize. It, did its thing. So a mallet, not appropriate. A bonnet, that is a great rule of thumb, a great treatment of and delivery of input for this situation. I mean, out of the ones you got, that's a good one. And also, I think that the outcome is going to be quite good. So that's a bonnet. Okay. So mallets are, remember, whether it's adapted to the situation. You can't. I mean, you can say, oh, that's generally a mallet because it runs very often. It's a very K's. It has a high K's score, but it shouldn't run. It's just not good. So you could say that is a mallet. And then every once in a while, even for that guy, you can be like, in that situation, that mallet saved your life. That was a bonnet, and it saved your life. That was exactly the situation for that. Usually, you're doing that all the time. It's terrible, but blah blah. And then of course, but that's why it's dangerous to maybe describe them generally, because then the person doesn't do that one thing. The one time you actually were supposed to do that, you were always doing that. I hate it. And the one time I asked you to actually do that, you didn't do it. It would have been a bonnet here. It's what your friends wanted. Okay. So, and rather than, okay, great, we don't have to invent a word. And also, that would be a shame if we didn't already have a word for the processes of the system. Okay, so this inaccurate risk assessment can be potentially dangerous because we may be tempted to change our behavior patterns based on mallets. All of our things are its. There's no reasoning foundation. All of our mental elements are its. Okay? God did not put them in there. Mother Nature did, and no offense to her. But, she kept it so it wouldn't be worse. Could have been worse. Mother Nature was our bumpers, but also our encourager, our inspiration. But we didn't build a perfect system, despite Mother Nature's help in filtering and selections and all that. And it's not even possible. How would you do that? How would you have every single weight be perfect? Now, how you can do that for if you're actually building a cake? Well, you can do that. So why can't you do it with thoughts? Well, one, because with the assembly line, it has to be set up beforehand. Everything has to be in place, and all the nodes have to know their rules, their jobs, how much of this input and how much of this input to put together for their output. Everybody has to be told that ahead of time before you send the ingredients in, or before the given node receives its ingredients. So it's going to know what ingredients it's going to receive. We know exactly what ingredients we're sending into the system. So each node, it's only going to receive certain ingredients, and then it has been told ahead of time exactly what to do with those ingredients. Real life isn't like that. So in the future, there'll be a little bit more accommodation for that. I won't be expected to just flounder about and do it. But because I have ADHD, I'm not that guy who's going and getting his medicine, just a couple days before it runs out. Because it's fucking hard. The pharmacies are closed in the afternoon. Whatever, they're not that closed in the afternoon. But that's the number one reason, that it can't be pre-programmed. We're constantly sort of encountering new situations. Now, sometimes we have a certain preparedness for certain new situations. But that's basically like, you got a weird ingredient comes along, and you got someone who goes, this smells really, really bad. I'm just going to throw this out. And that's like part of its rules. If something just smells really, really bad. Of course, even then, get a year's worth, I'm not allowed to go back for, 10 months or something. And then if I want to sell 2 months worth, okay, so be it. So fucking be it. You're going to throw out stuff that might actually be good and an important ingredient in the cake. I don't know whether in the cooking process you lose some of whatever is making it. I had to do this shit like every month. Smell bad, but you keep some other flavors that it has or whatever. I don't know. So one thing is that it's not only, we don't have, the inputs are not controlled. Okay, in the cake factory, you're always sending in chickens or eggs or whatever. You're sending in some flour, some yeast, whatever. I don't know how to make a cake really. Some sugar, whatever. But imagine now with our cake factory that you just start sending in all kinds of shit. Right? Not anything can get into the factory, right? But even if you send in, I don't know, normally the guy's used to getting 70% dark chocolate. You send in 90%, he wasn't prepared for that. I may have had a little bit of preparedness for if it's like super strong, but he might just end up throwing it away and then you don't get any of that chocolate. You understand? So that's the one reason why a cake factory can make a cake, but the human mind can't be reasonable. A cake factory can be ingredient reasonable, but the human mind cannot be reasonable because it is not, the ingredients are not controlled. What comes in and what, and how it's presented, how it's packaged as well. That's huge. You've got dudes on the node that are only looking for certain things. And if it's just packaged differently, and as we say in IT theory, if it's fit differently, if it's framed differently, then they might not recognize it, throw it out, or misuse it or whatever, think, they get a big beach ball, and they're the node that has to send along the heavier thing. They're like, that looks heavy to me. Because they can't fit it on their scale. They weren't prepared for that. Usually they use this little tiny scale. But then they're like, all right, well, I can't really get it on the scale. And they tried to get on the scale, but they were putting pressure as they were holding it. And so the weight looked bigger. Okay. So that's one thing. That the inputs are not, we cannot be pre-prepared for everything that we come across. Number two is complexity. And because it's all imperfect, it's just trying to imitate reason. Every sort of whatever distance the it comes up short of perfectly imitating reason, that can easily be compounded in the system, or just have all kinds of effects because it's just so many functions and so many things happening. So something exists in one form here and it moves through an incredibly complicated system and can lead to all kinds of butter effects because there's so many interactions. Now, yes, it would be possible to deal with that. You could create an artificial intelligence that, despite the complexity, that every node knows what it's doing. And you've got certain error procedures where the whole process gets run again. Once you realize that a node was faulty, that was doing something wrong, it was sending in 95%, 5% rather than 70-30, or it was sending on. Once you realize that, an artificial intelligence system could have programmed in with it, or we could have artificially, but it just hasn't evolved yet, a registry of all of the different processes, everything that came from that node. And then an artificial intelligence system, which can do many more computations than we can, or, a computer can do many more computations than we can in 2024, or in 1224, 12024. Oh, gosh, it's hard to say. Anyway, then that would be able to, it will have marked every process that node has been involved in since the last time it was checked and updated. And then it can track maybe all of those processes. That is not impossible, but our brain is not up to that, cannot do that. So those are the two reasons that our rationality is impossible. You can't pre-calibrate because you don't know all the inputs that it's going to get. And then number two is that even what you, because you can't pre-calibrate perfectly, even the stuff that you are prepared to get, because there are imperfect calibrations, so you can't pre-calibrate perfectly. Okay, so of course we're calibrated, and then those calibrations are adjusted through our lifetime, but not with enough iterations for all the necessary adjustments to be made. So the one thing that rationality is impossible is because of novel input. Now, even if you controlled the input, what has been pre-calibrated based on certain expected input, there are going to be errors. And those errors can have all kinds of consequences in the system. They can be filtered out, compensated for, but often, since we're so arrogant, they tend to get bigger and bigger, and we just rationalize them and so on. Not tend to. On the little things, object recognition, stuff like that, we tend to do a pretty darn good job. But on the stuff like origins of the universe kind of stuff. So that's one, novel input. So it can't be pre-programmed. Number two, you can't prepare ahead of time for input that you've never had and that you can't anticipate. Okay. Number two is that imperfect calibration. Evolution's a messy bitch. Fast and dirty, baby. So the calibrations that are set up are imperfect and can only be mildly improved. I mean, with a lot of work, you can greatly, significantly improve certain, turn them from mallets into bonnets. but not without critical recognition and effort, which is not what we're doing because we believe in ourselves too much. So one, novel input, so you can't pre-calibrate. Two, imperfect, because that's just how it works. We're not perfect. It's just how it works. Things got built, they get more complex. They're not getting perfect. In some sense, they may be getting better and better, but they're still not. They'll never be perfect. It's all whack and weird and just changing, and the environment. Anyway, so we have imperfect calibrations. Well, imperfect calibrations in dominodal processing can have major consequences. So we have imperfect calibrations. Anything short of perfect calibrations, it can't be reasonable, even if the input is controlled. A third reason, pretty weak corrective measures. Remember we described an AI that's like, once it identifies a faulty node, then it reprograms that node, says, no guys, it's 70%, 30%. And then it goes back and checks all process, all the process that's been happening. We don't have that developed of a system. We have an ability to change our minds. Don't even use that. But it isn't by that we change our minds. We don't consider all the past processes. It's really just about, am I free to really be open to a new possibility? That's when we change our minds. And typically, that's going to be because your group membership no longer hinges on you maintaining the thing that you believe. So if you've met a new group that will accept you, or that already has accepted you, and your belief is no longer tied to social identity, then you can look a little bit fresh at maybe what they're proposing, or it can be some other unrelated belief, but you've got your group that isn't threatened by you changing your mind, and then you're gonna change your mind, and then future outputs will be changed. But we don't have a system for going back and evaluating everything. And then, so this belief we've been holding for a while, we got to question all these previous processes that led to it. So now we have to question this. No, it's just like, but I will question this belief if I'm swayed right now. But not by going back and looking through my processes. I'm not going to realize an error. Yes and no. Anyway. One, novel input. 2, imperfect calibration. 3, poor corrective measures. Which get compounded, those imperfect calibrations. Some get weeded out, but some get compounded. I don't know why this is a fourth thing, but energy efficiency. We will always tend toward any process that is simpler, but any process that is simpler leaves more room for error. It's less nuanced. And the less nuanced things are what we prefer because they're easier, they get their job done, fast and dirty is how we like it. I'll say those 3 reasons. And then the reasons that those 3 reasons exist is because just like time, we haven't had that much time to evolve perfect calibrations. The nature of the world, it's sending us novel inputs in all kinds of packaging. And also we tend to prefer the simpler things that are not terribly disastrous and might help a little bit some of the time. Yeah, obviously we need to stop now. I'm sorry. Have the pharmacy call call us. Now I'm going to 2 hours away, so And I'm hoping she wasn't saying, oh no, I'll make an exception for you, sweetheart. Anyway, so I left with nothing. I didn't know what to do. I said, well, give me the phone number. She said, no, have the pharmacy call. I'm not going to give you the phone number. I was like, yeah, right. You know what? But this got me thinking, because 2024 Akbar 23 Deldi 1812. So this tattoo here, 4 bottom lines, 3 vertical lines, 4 points, 4 top points, okay? So we have made an adjustment to it, by the way. We had these vertical 3 meant the 3 components of critical thinking. Actually, it's going to be the bottom 4. So we've got critical recognition, critical reflection, critical research, and then we've got critical resolution. Now, these bottom 4 were my 4 favorite inventions, but instead it's going to be these vertical 3. We're going to drop internet. So we've got language, agriculture, and reason. Because there we can, and that's what I'm working on, the different aliases, we can invent systems that, because they're built in based on how our minds are built, or with the knowledge of how our minds are built, they're like bumpers that help us to mitigate our fallacies and biases, whether that's individual, interpersonal, communal, monalaris, dialaris, wealaris. Okay. And so I think if we put these systems in place, first of all, obviously, if we get critical recognition, people know what their brains are, and we're a little less arrogant about our outputs. That'll be one major thing. But then also, if we standardize inputs, if we learn how to fit things, how to frame things, such that our minds know what to do with it, then we can greatly increase our reasoning level. By using our heuristics better, by slapping the right ones when we need it. So the more we learn about the system and the different ifs that it responds to, the more we know, oh, we shouldn't use that word, because that'll trigger that mallet. If we just change the word without changing the meaning and without changing the implications in the sentence, just changing its flavor, we won't, that mallet will stay quiet, and that bonnet will be activated, and you'll get a more reasonable output. Because I define reason and rationality the same thing as, although I like Pinker's definition, I define reason as good treatment of information. So you've got a bonnet in there, a reasonable one, because that is the right treater for this information I'm sending in. But I better package it right so that he knows it's for him. So, so yeah. So that'll be a major change to public rationality. Critical recognition, some Bayes' theorem, but then also the Alaris methods. So if you want to evaluate a candidate, and let's say you go to the candidate's website, there's a 500-word thing where he explains his background and policies and hopes, okay? You want to remove from that things that shouldn't influence you, right? So you're going to have a list of protocols for a Manalaris technique, where it says, so it's going to say things like one technique, for instance, is going to be remove all adjectives, keeping only their valence. So good or bad, but not very good, not great, increase or decrease. We had an increasing or decreasing, but not very increasing, whatever. You can leave numbers in, any numbers that are in there, okay. Except all the numbers need to be on the same scale. They have to all be about the same number of digits. So you can't alternate between percentages, raw numbers, and so on, because we know that the brain's not great at seeing actual value. It's very easy to think that 2.6% is, or I don't know, 50% more is not as much as 150 times. So if you say everything has to be 3 characters in that paragraph, maybe we have to use leading zeros, so that I don't know what would need to be done, but you fit the thing such that regardless of who wrote it and what flavor it had, the information is the same as this other thing. You're comparing 2 candidates or whatever. It makes it really easy for the heuristics that we have, or you give a really digestible things for the heuristics that we have. Also, part of the process of candidate evaluation would be every candidate has 5 sort of fields. And it makes it easier to compare candidates when you just compare one field to the other, rather than assessing the candidate based on all these 5 fields, assessing the other candidate based on these 5 fields, and then thinking that you can then assess the candidates, even though you're imperfectly calibrated, so you may have greatly weighed this thing, not at all weighed this thing. And this guy had this going for him. This guy also had this going for him, but you didn't weigh it, really. You gave more weight to this thing. So then this guy maybe, and this was a negative thing, so then this guy looks better. But then if you had just compared this, you would have gone, oh, well, if I just compare these, regardless of how I need to weigh them in the whole thing, he's better here. And that might be important to send down the line. But you lose that. So that's the future. That's okay. So that's pretty cool. So Alarith, the thing that we're working on, is gonna save the world. Awesome. All right, let's take a break. I don't know what to do with you. I need someone here with a whip. We can only accept them within 10 days of when they've been written. No. The hospital said to call them if there's any confusion. Call your local hospital. He said, do you speak English? I said, I do. He said, these are expired. He said, these are expired. We can only accept them from within that same month. This is February. Now it's April. Stop. 24 Ekber 23 Deldi 1826. So let's just talk about that a little bit longer. Thanks. Hopefully this is actually what you're here for. Fuck Bruce Hood. Those typos. Alright. So what we've been talking about is it's impossible for a system or a system to be rational or processing. And what is processing? If then, right? Treatment of information. Okay. So we'll just keep saying the same thing. There's all words for the same thing. It's impossible for a system, whatever, to perfectly treat information, aka to be reasonable, if there's going to be novel information. Just by definition, can't be pre-calibrated. Of course, now Edast, I do hear you, but I don't want to talk to you because I have enough stuff to say to society. But Edast, you're thinking, oh, then how come we don't bug out every time we see a new face? Okay, that's not novel information. An eye is not novel information. An eye's being placed somewhere is not novel information. Now, if it's placed here, we will bug out a bit. That will be a bit too novel. But our brain does not consider, and even if you've never ever in your life seen a pair of eyes with exactly 0.96245813 centimeters apart from each other, which is very close, by the way. Even if you've never seen that, if you see that, that's not novel information. Your brain is ready to handle distance between the eyes. It's ready to handle very close distances between the eyes. And so what it's going to say is, oh, that's very close. Never seen that exact number before, but there's nothing novel about this kind of information or this piece of information. So that's what novel means, where it's information that the mechanisms they don't know what to do with. Or that they just weren't prepared for. In fact, if you see someone with eyes that close together, there are certain things you're going to believe about that person. And it's not going to be fair or rational. But you're going to have certain, well, that looks a little cuckoo to me, and also very harmless. Anyway, I don't remember what my point was. But anyway, the more novel the information is, the less prepared, that means that the less prepared the system is for it. Less prepared the system is for it, but the less likely it's going to perfectly treat the information, right? That's what prepared means. I mean, it's all the same thing. I mean, I know that I could phrase this in a way where I could use the exact same word 3 times and it be clear. If a system doesn't know beforehand how to handle information, then it will mishandle information. Anyway, I don't remember what the 3 things. Anyway, all right. So novel input, that's one reason. That's just logically impossible for a system to perfectly handle information, because some of that information, that stuff it has to handle, might be novel. And so it might be mishandled. That was like the 3 or something. Okay. Now, the other 2 things that I said, imperfect calibration and weak correction mechanisms, those aren't like logical things that you can just axiomatically say make it impossible. But based on observation, we do know that humans have imperfect calibration. Also, you can get there sort of logically. Like if you have a good enough understanding of sort of evolution and time and stuff, and then you're told that a species developed, it very recently got written language. It very recently had a revolution of scientific thinking where it's like, hey, if I want to know about this world, should I like study the world and measure it? It very recently got the word sort of reasonable, and ask anybody on the street and they won't be able to define it. Or if they come up with the definition, that definition won't hold for the ways that they use it, and it won't be a useful definition. They've got, this many words that they use on a daily basis, and so on. They had this much exposure to these different inputs. Evolution generations can be about 25 years, and that's the only opportunity for a change to happen. The way change happens, it's very gradual. It's just like a nucleotide here, a nucleotide there, and then blah blah. So it takes thousands of generations to like see something, and so on. If you have all that information, but you never met a human in your life, you'd be like, oh, well, logically speaking, it's not possible that they're going to be perfectly calibrated. They just haven't gotten enough iterations to, and also the way that you're describing this whole biological evolution thing, it's not like every time they learn something is a fallacy that then their genes and their descendants will have that and know that. It could be taught, but you're telling me they only had written language for 6,000 years, and none of them can really define reasonable. And they believe that you said that they're souls. They don't even believe they're physical entities. Yeah, I just don't. I mean, just that doesn't logically leave a lot of room for me to think that they know how to treat information. And they all disagree about, and they have a lot of information they've had for a long time. I mean, since their scientific revolution, and most people don't believe that stuff. Obviously, but now we're moving into observation. And if you really observed this thing, and even logically, you'd be like, I would be surprised if it got a chance to really have good corrective measures. It only just came up with like basic imitations of reason. And then, yeah, I could through epigenetics maybe do some correcting. But when you talk to me about how those cell changes happen and the gene changes happen, I'm not seeing the responsiveness that I would imagine for the species to already have good corrective mechanisms. Now, we don't care about self-correction. It's in fact offensive to correct someone. You are in fact the asshole that wants to show that you're better than everyone. That's the social label, and we are all about community. So long it can lead to getting kicked out of the community to be correcting people. Well, obviously, we don't have a lot of cultural corrective mechanisms. By the way, oh yeah, EDAS. Also, I wanted to say, if you haven't bit the bullet yet, or bought the bullet, or whatever, and just accepted that we aren't reasonable, just think about everybody you disagree with, and just don't this time think that you're special. I want you to be like, whoa, if they can be that wrong, then I can be that wrong. Now, if you've got critical recognition and they don't, that's a pretty objective thing. Okay? And call me. We'll test your critical recognition. If you got critical recognition and they don't, you are already not the same kind of crazy. That's a significant change. Secondly, if you pathologically run through things or compulsively, or if you never feel satisfied with sort of your answers, okay, you are also not like them. I don't want anybody who is like them to be excluding themselves here. Oh yeah, and EDAST, that's not you. Sadi, okay, maybe you're not like them, but EDAST, those people who disagree with you are as rational as you are. There's only one way to set yourself apart: critical recognition. There are only two ways to set yourself apart: critical recognition and Bayes' theorem. There's only three ways to set yourself apart: critical recognition, Bayes' theorem, in some kind of Alarist capacity, like a dialectic or something. No, we'll just leave it at the first two. No, we'll just leave it at the big thing that will set you apart is critical recognition, knowing what your brain is, how it functions. Because that is an input that the brain can kind of handle, especially when we use metaphors, such as the judge myth, things like that. That's input that the brain can handle, and it is a major input to the system. Okay, only two types of people in the world: those with critical recognition, those without. Okay, otherwise said, two types of people in the world: those who are aware that they are imperfectly calibrated, that mallets are part of their thinking, and therefore that their outputs, you can always find something wrong with them. People who know that and people who don't. Okay, and we're cutting off any of those other people unless they're blood related. I know we can't do that because there's nobody. Okay, whatever. So already logically, novel input makes reason impossible. And then logically, how would the human brain have or how would a system really, it'd be very difficult for a system to have perfect calibration. Not impossible, but very difficult. Impossible when you about the generations and how the slow genetic changes and all that stuff. And then just by observing, okay, well, clearly, yeah, now that you let me see them, yes, they have imperfect calibrations, and terribly weak internal corrective measures. Like they'll say things, and then the next thing that they'll say will be justification. Even if you go, hey, I think that might be wrong. They're like, it takes a while. Any corrective measure they have, even it's not very sensitive. It takes a while, and then thinking about themselves almost never happens, unless it's like for some like high stakes reason, and there's an emotional thing attached to it because it's high stakes. Then sometimes there will be some correction, but they're very lazy with their corrections, and then also it's actually culturally discouraged. So if you tell me that we know how to treat information, despite that, I don't think it's actually worth us talking unless you can be very clear about what was wrong with that. But I have been very compelled by that. Now, if this was the first time I was thinking about it, that'd be absolutely meaningless to me. But anyway, I made that other video on the beach in Ibiza about reason. So anyway, look, Dico Sine Quadro, but very clear. And what I want a timestamp, put what I said, what should have been said, highlight the error, explain why that's an error, and why that substitution is correct. Let's do some proper alias with it, especially if I don't know you. All right, let's read. You know what? I'm fucking handicapped. I mean, yeah, it is kind of my mobility that's the problem. It is actually. All right, Nia, inside, buddy. Swear to God.
Recording started.
This inaccurate risk assessment can be potentially dangerous because we may be tempted to change our behavior patterns based on faulty reasoning. For example, an analysis of road traffic accidents for cars traveling to New York in the 3 months following 9/11, 2024 Ecuador 23 Delta 1840. Following 9/11 showed an increase in fatalities over expected numbers for that time of year and the build up to Christmas. In fact, the excess number was greater than the total number of airline passengers killed on that fateful day. Individuals frightened of flying to New York overestimated their risk and took to their cars instead, which led to heavier than usual traffic and the subsequent increase in road accidents. The most likely reason that people felt it was safer to drive was based on another illusion of the self, the illusion of control. We believe that we are safer when we think we are in control of our fate, such as when driving our own car, but feel unhappy when we are being driven by others, or, worse still, flown around in a metal cylinder that can fly out of the sky, irrespective of what we do. So this is why with DEI, it's all about it's all about, would you want her flying your plane? Part of it is, yeah, like the racist thing, but the racist thing also kind of shows up in, or it's just kind of a detail, but it's like, that's a reminder that I'm not in control at all. Not even of who, not only am I not at the thing, but I'm not at all in control of who sits up there. Of course, no matter what, you're not in control. But when you see a black, gay, trans, wheelchair-bound, fat woman, that's like, holy shit. Because I'm racist and all that, ableist and all that other stuff, and would never want her at the controls. And because she is in the controls, I'm reminded I'm not at all in control. Which exacerbates. Okay, cool. Section, analysis paralysis. Much of the time, our risk analysis is based on the perception of choice. Can we get out of a sticky situation? It is often assumed that choice is good, that decision-making makes us happier if we are allowed to exercise some self-control. Most of us feel safer when we drive. When faced with the prospect of not being able to help ourselves out of a situation, we become despondent, depressed, and helpless. Information on this reaction to the lack of control is based on experiments during the 1960s in which animals were put through stressful situations. In one study, 2 sets of dogs were given electric shocks. One set of dogs could terminate the pain by learning to press a lever. The other set of dogs were yoked to the first group, but did not have the option to press a lever, and so received the same amount of shocks. To them, there was nothing they could do to stop the pain because they had no choice. After these initial experiences, both sets of dogs were then placed in a shuttle box with 2 sides separated by a short barrier. Again, electric shocks were applied to the floor of the cage, but this time both sets of animals could avoid the pain by leaping the barrier to the other safe side of the box. What they discovered was very disturbing. Dogs that had experienced control in the first study with the lever readily learned to avoid the pain. But dogs that had not been able to avoid the electric shocks in the first study failed to jump the barrier to avoid punishment. They simply lay down on the cage floor whimpering and resigned to their torture. According to Martin Seligman, the psychologist who conducted this research, the animals had learned helplessness. It is not easy to read about this sort of animal experimentation in a detached way. I'm not a great animal lover, but I think I would have found such research difficult to conduct. All right, let me go to the pharmacy, and then we'll talk in a second. Nevertheless, these studies on inducing learned helplessness have proved invaluable in understanding factors that contribute to human misery and depression. Depression is probably one of the most common debilitating mental disorders. Yo, let me tell y'all about God and how foolish you are for ever questioning him. But I gotta figure out, hold on, I gotta look at this right now, hold on. If I can't put a tattoo here, I feel like I'm not in control. And rape, it's a huge reminder that you're not in control of this thing that's not only that is biologically like important and significant, but also that society values tremendously. Stuff about purity and stuff like that, and about, keeping your number low, how many people. So all this stuff about sexual partners, very controlled. That happens. And that your illusion of control is back. Depression is probably one of the most common debilitating mental disorders. I made a friend some time ago, about 10 days ago. I don't know how long it's been, actually. We have all had some experience of feeling low, but clinical depression is a pervasive illness that prevents people from leading a normal life. It can vary in its intensity, with behavioral and psychological symptoms usually related to feelings of worthlessness and despondency. It is commonly associated with other problems, most notably stressful life events such as bereavement, unemployment, and addiction, although there is much individual variation. Some of us are more predisposed to depression because it is a complex disorder that has genetic, biological, psychological, and social components. Not all depression is the same in its origins, but it is statistically more common among the poor and deprived in our society. One theory is that it is not so much that poverty is the root cause, but rather the circumstances that having no wealth entails. So anyway, we have a great time together. But do I want to drive? Because I want to learn Spanish. And I don't want to learn Portuguese. So see, she's driving all the way up to Porto in the north of Portugal. I don't know that I want to go up there. The inability of individuals to do anything about their lives. Like the inescapable shocks of the dogs, people learn helplessness, which leads to the negative fatalism that things can never get better. If you have critical recognition, then you're willing to accept this, and you're like, oh, okay. So there are things about the system that need to be changed because this is how minds function. See, I thought I'm pretty sure God wants me to. I'm pretty sure, the last few months, I've been getting so much peace and just feeling great about life. Knowing I don't have to worry about life. I can just do my things. And then I'm going to go to Africa and die somewhere in Africa. I can't just ask minds to not function this way. To just not Daniel Kahneman. That is how minds, all mammal minds, if it's, rats as well, that's how they function. Links that we have is that I called my imaginary twin brother Daniel. Let's have some critical recognition. Now, what do we do given that information? Like the inescapable shocks to the dogs. I realized while I was mourning Kahneman that actually, no, I think his name was David. People learn helplessness, which leads to the negative fatalism that things can never get better. The obvious solution is to empower people with choices. That always has been a name that's sort of been in my mind, I guess. Some would argue that this is what wealth really brings, the opportunity to make choices and not be shackled to a life you can't escape, or even just to feel like you have that option. And that's got to be a reason that I feel so much better ever since being outside. I get to decide what to do with my day. I don't have rent to pay. Yeah, because I haven't really been depressed since, well before 2018. And that's when I started to take control of some things. Even in 2016, 2017, I was feeling pretty good. But so I changed the fake profile to air as Daniel, thinking that Daniel, because Daniel's always been a name in my mind, and I also thought that it was the name that I had back then. I've had my moments, was feeling pretty good. I was in France, so I had this idea that I was in control because I had left my country, and I decided not to go back to university. So I was in control. There's Daniel, according to my fake Facebook profile. His hero dies, Daniel Kahneman. Okay. Now, Daniel Dennett is not one of Daniel's heroes, but of course, I was still. I had this job where, oh my gosh. Anyway, okay. So yeah. So this is happening. Look at my stupid virgin face. I don't want a reminder. This is what you are. You're the outcast who has questions. And even some answers. So the question mark, it's going to be like half of a light bulb. And then maybe we'll put the other half there at a later point. And that said, that this idea that illusionism, that I was telling him to read this article because he doesn't want to listen to me. So I was like, listen to this article. And the line says that Daniel Dennett is one of the major proponents. Or we'll just fill it in as a light bulb. When we're done with questions, we're sorting out our affairs, publishing the answers we've had, polishing them, letting someone else. Freedom evolves. I don't care how complex it is. It isn't freedom. For some intents and purposes, you can maybe describe it as freedom, and maybe that was his point. But just because you have a whole bunch of little things, and because it becomes very difficult to predict, does not make it actual first cause freedom. Deal with questions. We're just finishing the presentation of our answers. We'll change it into a light bulb. Okay. I guess I'm sorry, not sorry. It is commonly about talking so much. It is commonly associated with other problems, blah, blah, blah. The fact that I'm 33, I've been thinking, is this actually my year? But no. I can, maybe another decade or something. I don't know. There's just a lot of work that I have to do first. A lot of stuff I have to figure out and figure out how to communicate.
Not all depression is the same in its origins, but it is statistically blah, 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 blah. The opportunity to make choices and not be shackled to a life you can't escape. If nothing changes, no matter what you do, you have the basics for despair. You have the basics for despair.
If you catch up to me by watching my videos, a smart person could finish my work anyway, and someone will, even if no one sees my videos.
The need for control appears to be fairly important for both physical and mental health. Simply believing that you have the power to change your life makes it more bearable. This is one reason why Liz Murray's Homeless to Harvard story offers such hope. We also saw this with free will when we learned that people develop rituals and routines because these behaviors give the illusion of control when in fact there is none.
The more I learn about the mind, the harder it is to interact with people that don't even think that they're biological organisms. And it's not.
Giving people choices, or at least the perception of control, empowers them to tolerate more adversity. For example, people will tolerate more pain if they think they can turn it off at any moment, even when they have no control over the stimulus.
I've been having trouble getting my medication.
Perceived control attenuates the pain centers of the brain. And that's what, in these videos, I'm imagining exerting.
I don't know why God was making it so hard. It's never been this hard. Been turned away from pharmacies, but it's never been this hard. Where every pharmacy I go to, and then
some control, some influence. I'm contributing. I am not helpless to this world of irrationality, as it says in my YouTube video, an unreasonable man trying to be reasonable among unreasonable people who think that they're reasonable. I could just be helpless there. Fucking not. I work hard, I'm talking to you, we're hanging out, we're having a good time. And that anticipation of that imagining of me teaching you something about
I was
this.
like, why don't people want me to get my medicine?
I talk to you, I'm not gonna have to deal with the same shit. And also you'll be able to deal with my shit.
You can work without your meds. Shut the fuck up. You don't know how hard it's been, how drunk I have to get just to quiet it down a little bit.
Because you'll know how to name it,
but honestly,
announce it.
I always have an excuse to drink.
Hey, Aerith, that thing you said, it's wrong, and there was this mallet in the liberation. Oh, whoa. So you're not malenting, different word, malenting me thinking I was trying to hurt you. You see, I just had one of my notes that mishandled some information. Thanks, buddy. Blah, blah, blah.
We don't call him God. We call him Moa.
That was a bad... I feel like now I have a million things. It's not... I have like 3 things I want to say about that example. Because that already assumes that, like, I actually did hurt someone's feelings. But often it's like... Sometimes I do hurt people's feelings. I can be quite stern with people that I'm close to. And tell them, you're wrong. And get very frustrated when they try to get out of a conversation. I get very annoyed. That's true. But the other stuff I've been judged for was just that their brain didn't know how to handle this output, which was their input. Didn't know how to handle it. And I am working on that. One, you are seeing who I am. And 2, we're going to figure out ways how to... Because knowing that we should question interpretations is great.
Drive to Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, we meet Sonia. All the signs are telling me.
How do we question them? What do we do to
someone
answer those questions we have about our interpretation? And that's what's coming. That's what the Alaris stuff is going to be. So that's this year and next year. Probably up until 2030. I don't know. I'm pretty excited about it, so it might not take that long. But
everything was pointing to abuse.
How could it not take that long? But I might feel satisfied with something before then. But that will be my mistake to feel satisfied. Anyway,
find her the day after we leave. and it's like, and we don't really care.
Okay, so we literally see the brain's pain centers are attenuated when the brain thinks it has control, even when it doesn't. We even enjoy our meal more if there is choice on the menu. We even enjoy our meal more if there's choice on the menu. These sorts of findings. Okay, yes, I hear you. You're like, no, I hate it when
We meet
there's
Quarantine, who said she had been thinking about how lonely it is traveling alone, and then there I was on my bike. She saw me on my bike. We both spoke French.
A whole bunch of when it's like overwhelming. I get overwhelmed. Okay, that's not actually what it said, and you're just being resistant. We even enjoy our meal more if we enjoy our meal more, not the initial dining experience made, but the actual meal when we chose
She
it.
wants to go up here. Porto. You see Porto up there?
Out of all these other options, part of it's cognitive dissonance. But he's going to talk about all this stuff. Probably about the justification of choice. And we say, well, if we made the choice, then we made the right choice. Not because we made it, but because, well, we chose this one out of all those other things, and obviously we did that correctly, so it means all those other things are bad, and this thing is good. Alright. These sorts of findings support a generally held view that choice is good, and the more choices you have, the better. It's a principle that modern societies exhibit through conspicuous consumerism. However, this is only true up to a point. Sometimes you can have so much choice that it can overwhelm the self. Okay, yeah, but I didn't want you to reject what was being said before.
I want to do it. I want to do it soon, and I want to die doing it.
Because of that. That's why he said it first. Okay, now, okay. Once again, Aesop knew this in his fable of the fox and the cat. Faced with the impending pack of savage hunting dogs bearing down on them,
I am now officially moving away from Africa.
The fox and the cat had to escape. For the cat, this was a very easy decision to make, as she bolted up a tree. However, the fox, with all his cunning know-how,
I've been waiting for a sign from God, from Moa, about what I'm supposed to do next.
With all his cunning know-how of the many ways he could escape, became paralyzed by indecision and fell prey to the savage hounds. Faced with too many choices, the fox had analysis paralysis. And he could have solved it.
And also her dog and my dog get along super well. He's never had a guy best friend before.
Well, he didn't have much time to do a Manalaris. But if we come up with some shortcut, quick Manalaris system, and built into the Manalaris is like...
rather hang out around here.
Takes time into account, and it's just like, go with your gut. If we don't have an answer yet, go with your gut, which is how we're programmed anyway. But like just a thing to say, it's okay. I know you're thinking, you just need to do something. But we have a pretty good action bias. Anyway.
And also we're supposed to get a tattoo, so... I mean, she mentioned wanting to get a tattoo, and I take that as a sign, so...
However, the fox, with all
decide what was a sign after.
Cunning know-how of the many ways he could escape, became paralyzed by indecision and fell prey to the savage hounds. Faced with too many choices, the fox had analysis paralysis and didn't know Manalaris. The same problem confronts us every day. The paradox of choice, as the psychologist Barry
So I'm sitting in the waiting room. And the door to one of the offices, 3 offices, one here, one there, and one there. The door here opens. And she's wearing a mask. There's a guy standing by the door. She kind of looks at him like this. I was a little bit disappointed that she didn't like smile at him or something. I don't know. That's stupid of me.
Is that the more choices we are given, the less free we become because we procrastinate in trying to make the best decision. The whole modern world has gone choice crazy. For example, in his supermarket, Schwartz counted 285 different varieties of cookies, 75 iced teas, 230 soups, 175 salad dressings,
anyways,
and 40
she was cute.
different...
She had a mask on, but she was cute.
Any modern electrical appliance store is packed to the brim with so many different models with different features and functionality. We become swamped by indecision. Look,
And then just naturally, it's not like I was like, I wonder what our kids will like, but just naturally.
ADHD makes weighing options and all that difficult. But I don't even like really get in the process.
So no soulmate of mine, oh, we really like this. No soulmate of mine would have survived this world. Or like would survive really any longer than I'm surviving, I don't think.
The whole thing, if there's a bunch of like choice, a bunch of research that has to be done, I tell myself that the reason I don't do it is because I don't have good mechanisms to judge those things anyways. I'm just gonna walk away thinking I've made a good decision anyway. Might as well just not even make one. So my mom wanted me to research what kind of vehicle I wanted to get. Well, I knew what kind of vehicle I wanted to get, but to research a vehicle this size, just had no idea how to do that. All these different websites, all these different things, all these details about each thing to compare. I was gonna say I think I was born with critical recognition because I just don't even try. I'm just well aware. I would not go into a hardware store and look at the options. Would not do it. I'd Google what's the best one. I'd Google what are things to think about, right? So then they would give me just a couple of things: space and whether it has this function. Okay, so I'm going to look at things that have this function because I agree that I want this function. So I'm going to limit my search to that, and then I'm just going to look for the cheapest one. That's it. That's it. That's all I can do, and I think that's all anybody can do. But then they think that they've gone and made this choice, and then they can justify their choice because of course they have good reasons for that thing.
Those neurons were set up in such a way that that path of activity could occur.
Didn't compare all those aspects, and they certainly weren't perfectly calibrated to compare that. We just don't have the processing power for it. Ugh.
And the moment I imagined us, it seemed crazy, and I'm too outside of the,
And I may have less processing power, but I'm manyfold more aware that we don't have the processing power for it relative to you guys. Well, to you, Edest, anyway. Any modern electrical appliance store is packed to the brim with so many different models with different features and functionality that we become swamped by indecision.
Good, and it doesn't feel sad or anything. I'm honestly like good. I have been loved, and I just honestly don't think that is out there for me, and that's kind of the point of this entry.
Okay, good. Some people are swamped, so they recognize blah, blah, blah. But then they're paralyzed by it. I just go, all right, what's the cheapest? How many times have you gone to buy something? Because they think that they can do it. So they're like, but then if I think about this and think about that, stop it, bro. Your human brain in the year of their, since agriculture, 12,024, bro. Stop acting like you can process this, like you can treat this information. How many times have you gone to buy something from a large supplier only to leave empty-handed because you could not make a decision? We are so worried that we may make the wrong choice that we try to compare. You will make the wrong choice. That we try to compare. It's just about making a choice you're happy with. That we try to compare about being happy with something that isn't perfectly reasonable and true, since you are never going to find what's perfectly reasonable and true anyway. We are so worried that we may make the wrong choice that we try to compare the different products along dimensions that we have not even considered relevant before we enter the door. Do I need it Bluetooth enabled? What about their RAM? What about Wi-Fi? The majority of us who are not nerds find this overload of choice too much. Actually, when I was looking, I was able to compare MacBooks. I knew I was going to get a MacBook, right? So I was comparing a whole bunch of different. But then for the MacBooks, yeah, I knew I needed more of this.
When you talk to them, it seems like they're reasonable and they're there, and it feels like you're reasonable and here and present and existing as this soul and as that soul, and you're communicating and bonding and all this stuff, and then you realize it's just programming.
The majority of us who are presented with so many options, we are unable to process the decisions efficiently. This leads to the sort of procrastination that makes us put off things that we really should do now. Every spring, I have students who come to me to make a decision about what to undertake in their final year research project. And they always say that they will make a start and get the bulk of it done over the summer. Certainly they all believe they will have it ready by Christmas before the deadline in March. And yet not one student has ever achieved this. I don't know how you can know that. And you need the VIT. So maybe it's true that he couldn't know that. But why did I say that? The reason I think I said that, what triggered that, the VIT, the thing to which we can attribute that is probably just a resistance, trying to listen from from what I imagine your perspective to be. And I have got a skeptical eye, so that I can make sure to catch all your doubts.
Telling you it's chocolate all the time, and when you point at their buttholes and ask where the fuck the chocolate would have even come from,
Which I know that I can't, of course, but I try to catch as many as possible. And anyway.
oh, you're arrogant for calling that shit. You don't think I'm able to create chocolate? You don't think chocolate comes out of my butthole?
He says, let's just accept it, not one student has ever achieved this. Or let's look at a probability. Almost not one student has ever achieved this, probably. There is always a catalog of reasons why they never got around to do the work until the last moment.
As I read that last bit, just pop my little...
Despite all their best intentions. As the English poet Edward Young
because,
observed,
so anyway,
procrastination.
I got called, but she was the one who called me, right? So there's 3 officers. I go in the cutie patooties.
Is the thief of time. With all the choices available and other temptations that present themselves, we put off what we should do now until it is too late. All this work on decision-making should clearly tell you that our self is at the mercy of the choices with which we are presented.
Oh, I'm Mexican! I was like, oh my gosh! She's like, so you like traveling and blah, blah. And she's got other people to take care of. But she, and she's like, sorry, I asked so many questions. Maybe she was asking that about all the geese. I don't know.
By the way, have a little bit of critical recognition. I don't know that, could be a misinterpretation, but I think my accent
didn't really put on the charm. I was kind of confused. I was like, what's going on, God? I literally just wrote that, like, there's no way that this is anything.
Different British accents are kind of good if I've been listening to it. Listening, and do it. Everybody's is obviously better.
Why does she keep talking to me like this?
But I seem to lack the ability to sort of...
Why do I have butterflies right now when she's talking to me right now?
Produce while consulting in my working memory a sound. To produce the sound. So, like, I can't do, like, a beat. Oh, you know that one song that goes... And then it's gone. It just can't come out. And I got to work really hard to imagine again. And then when I'm about to produce it... So there's that track... That soup it.
I am now like, all right, I do need to, if this is what you want, then I'll kind of try to make it happen.
Okay, if this is what it sounds like, then make this sound. Very weak in my mind. Very, very weak, and maybe because I have a very limited sort of audio library, maybe it's a working memory thing, maybe it's the track of that working memory of consulting and producing. Maybe it's the production department. No idea.
I guess she was as flustered as I mean, I wasn't flustered. I was like, because I'm about to get flustered if she keeps talking to me like this.
But remember that, but there are some aspects of the process that I think are working. And I know that because, well, I don't know that, but I feel that way because...
Practice with? She says, no, I don't. I said, and would it be, like, inappropriate for me to give you my number? She goes, no, it wouldn't be. I'd love that.
When I'm watching a show and I start doing it, well, it's not that it sounds good. It just doesn't sound bad.
But that wasn't what we're expecting. Of course, God does his thing. We should never expect what Mo is going to do.
But again, if I'm bad at, like, consulting sounds and stuff, maybe and we do know that I think I can sing and I can't. So actually, yeah, I can't even... It might just be my confidence that increases when I've been listening to the accent. No, I think it's both. Because I think I'm nailing the accent. Probably not nailing it, so that's just a little bit of a unjustified confidence increase. But also, there is some improvement when I've got it,
in Spain from Mexico, and she came so that she could travel.
We're doing it together. We're doing it together. Here I go. Oh, and it's gone. All right. With all the choices available and other temptations that present themselves, we put off what we should do now. All this work on decision making should clearly tell you that our self is at the mercy of the choices with which we are presented, our input. Our capacity for decision making is dependent on the context. If there are too many choices, then the alternatives cancel each other out, and we are left with indecision. Even when we do make a decision, we are less happy because we dwell on whether we made the right choice. If we had no choice, then there's no problem and the world is to blame. But then we get depressed. However, if we chose something that does not turn out to be ideal, then that is our fault for not choosing wisely. It's often a no-win situation.
Just keep coming here, and but come in the morning. It's better in the morning. Something, something, something.
Section, Relativity in the Brain. Dan O'Reilly is a behavioral economist. This is why I got confused. But no, I think last time I looked him up, his label was psychologist. But of course,
She says, "Do you live around here?" And I said, "Oh, well," and she said, "I mean, is this where you're around for the time being?" No, I just got here this morning from 2 hours away, and tomorrow, if I hadn't met you, I'd be 2 hours away again.
Dan O'Reilly is a behavioral economist from Duke University who makes the argument that humans are not only poor at risk analysis, but they are in fact predictably irrational. It's like,
why would I ever do that to anyone? Because because it couldn't actually work.
The second or third book I read on this trajectory, one of the most important, before Daniel Kahneman. So the pre-Kahneman books, we've got Unthinking Harry Beckwith, Freakonomics, and Predictably Irrational. Major. Whoa. Bro, I've known since 2009 that we're not rational. I hadn't fully understood what that meant. Of course, I still don't, I guess. But you don't know what you don't know. But hey, you're not too late. I'm so excited that you're here. It gives me the sense that I have some control over the quality of this world, the quality of my environment. This occurred to him when he was browsing the web, the fact that we're predictably irrational. This occurred to him when he was browsing the web and found an ad for magazine subscriptions to The Economist, which had 3 yearly, I love these, 3 yearly options. 1, online only at $59. 2, print only at $125. And 3, online print combination at just a little bit more. Oh no, the same price. Okay, here we go. So he's browsing the web and he finds an ad for magazine subscriptions to The Economist. Okay, he had 3 yearly options. 1, online access only, $59. 2, no online access, only print, $125. And 3, you get online and print for $125. Clearly, the best offer was option 3, where you get both online and print versions for the same price as just the print version alone. Clearly. When he tested this offer on his students, he found that 84% said they would choose option 3 and 16% would choose option 1. Clearly. No one chose option 2. No one chose print only. You'd have to be crazy to choose only the print version when you could also have the online version for no extra cost. But this was a deliberate strategy by The Economist to make option 3 look more attractive by comparing it with a decoy. When O'Reilly removed option 2 and gave them the choice again, this time 68% chose option 1, online only, and only 32% went with option 3. So when there was no print-only option, More than half of the people who had chosen the print and online no longer wanted the print and online. They now just wanted the online. Well, I thought you guys got the print and online, but at both worlds. I thought that was like so attractive. That was, it was rational. Of course, get online and print. Wait a minute, you don't actually want print. Wait a minute, you don't even want print? And what are you getting online and print for? You don't want print, bro. You just think you want print. You don't even think you want print. You're just acting like you want print because of this decoy option. Oh, I don't think we're irrational. I don't think you know how to treat information. The decoy had distorted the student's sense of value. Notice how easily the decision is swayed by the context. Now, with critical recognition, it would be illegal to fit something like that. Unless it's for experimental purposes or for some good, like, being an organ donor or something like that. And even if it's for some good, it should be announced. People should know why it's presented like that. And then they're like, yeah, okay, I know I'm more likely to choose it because they're doing it that way. But yeah, I'll choose that. Or you just have to always say it. In a critically recognized society, you would need to put a disclaimer, for instance. You would say, hey, I'm using this mechanism. They probably shouldn't actually play a role in your decision here, but I know that it will, so I'm using that. Now, you have that piece of information. If you want a system to it, want to get in there and, if you want to, have that point out to you, cover up the second option, just consider the two. If you want to put that effort in, fine. If you had to get your glasses to read this text, to read this disclaimer. Oh, I didn't mean to put a bookmark there. O'Reilly points out that this is the problem of relativity. Humans do not make judgments in absolute values, but rather in relative terms. And then you get a lot more flexibility with your system, don't you? Rather than having like program $100 is a lot or a little or whatever, you program a value system that just takes whatever other numbers are available and goes from there. And then you just focus on what do you do with that anchor. That's why the anchor effect. You just assuming that anchor is the value. Okay, now what do we do? Because it would be way too complicated to have a system that actually looks at the value. Humans do not make judgments in absolute values, but rather in relative terms. We are always weighing up the costs and benefits of different choices, and we estimate values accordingly. This also explains why people tend not to choose the cheapest or most expensive option, but the one in the middle. The top price is really a decoy. This strategy is sometimes known as the Goldilocks effect, after the fairy tale of the little girl who discovers that she prefers the porridge that's not too hot and not too cold. The preference for the mid-range price is why retailers often have an expensive option to increase the likelihood of customers choosing a product that costs less but is not the cheapest. Relativity in decision making reveals that we do not have an internal value meter that tells us how much things are worth. Relativity in decision making reveals that we do not have an internal value meter that tells us how much things are worth. Rather, our decisions are shaped by the external context. Relativity does not just apply in economic decision making, but is, in fact, a fundamental principle of how our brains operate. Everything we experience is a relative process. When something seems hotter, louder, brighter, smellier, sweeter, that experience is one of relative judgment. So your nodes in your cake factory, they're just looking at what's heavier relative to what they get and some of the previous stuff that they got. There are no absolute values. It's never, okay, only put something of this size. Every change in the environment registers as a change in neural activity. At the very basic level of neural connections, this is registered as the relative change in the rate of impulses firing. In the early experiments in which scientists recorded the electrical activity of a single neuron, they inserted an electrode to measure the electrical impulses of the cell and played it through loudspeakers. When inactive, one could hear the occasional click. One could hear the occasional click of the background activity of the neuron as the occasional impulse was triggered. However, as soon as some stimulus was presented that excited the neuron, the clicks would register like the rapid-fire Gatling gun. That's just your, wait, what is that? That's just your resting potential? No. Every once in a while, what, a neuron just fires, even if it's not triggered? That's like the baseline or something? So, just to stay active? But then when it gets triggered by another cell or by electrodes in this case, then it does the full concert. Did I say a Geiger counter? It says here a Gatling gun. Unless, did you just change that? Or did I say Gatling gun? This is how our brains interpret the world. When a change in the environment occurs, there is a relative increase or decrease in the rate at which the neurons fire, which is how intensity is coded. I know I'm going to feel so guilty and terrible about this. I'm just talking and stuff. I think I need to just give up on the reading, maybe. I like reading, just do what the fuck I want. I don't know. But just had a thought that I do want to share, because I know this isn't the everything video, but gosh darn, this has hit some things. So it might as well be the everything video. No, don't say that. Sometimes when I'm talking about the mind, and look, we're in this paragraph. We're reading this. This is how our brains interpret the world, he said. He's talking about economic decision making. There's never been any need to mention you. We don't need to do any kind of distinction. We're talking about the brains. You are your brain. We don't need to talk about consciousness and all that stuff. This stuff happens, and I was so invested in it, and then I imagined someone asking me, "Oh, and then consciously you blank." Ah, shut the fuck up. Can't talk about that. We don't have evidence for that. Let's just the brain, and this is how the brain interprets the world. Okay, it's neurons firing. I don't know what to do about all your conscious. Everybody wants to find, and where do I fit in? That's the whole point of it theory. That these are your parts. That this is you. That you as a whole only exists from outside. Inside, we see all your parts. There is no you inside. You're just anyway. When a change in the environment occurs, there is a relative increase or decrease in the rate at which the neurons fire, which is how intensity is coded. Right, so you don't have intensity of a certain signal. You have how many times it comes in. I've been missing that. I've been missing that. That's so important. With it theory, I talk about it as though everything happens like one time. But no, a piece of information keeps hollering out, keeps hollering out, keeps hollering out, keeps hollering out. And so it's not that it's not a neuron, and it doesn't go, oh, this thing is amazing. And it goes, this thing is good, 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 this thing is good. And that has the effect of, it's even been said, this is amazing. Okay. All right. Okay, that's super important. So we have to remember that when we do a map it, we're not imagining a piece of information comes in, it triggers this, which triggers this, which triggers this, and blah, blah. You have to imagine this line keeps running. And so maybe this one, it hadn't been triggered yet, but it keeps getting stimulated from the input. And then some other stuff that got stimulated from the input, when it converges there,
Well, we still got that original slight stimulus going. And then that's going to take it to over the top, because that is a problem I was having. So then it goes here, goes here, goes here. And then it has to go here, go here. No, no, no. It's colliding with other things that keep the beginning. Yes. Okay. Okay. That's so important. Right, bro? What do we call this? Signal intensity is about repetition. But also, of course, yeah. Now we have the repetition on the smaller scale of if a cell from over here slaps, cell from over here slaps, and a cell from over here slaps. Not at the same time, so we're not looking at spatial summation to get us over the threshold. But the cell is a little bit of a memory. And so that hit, and then that hit, and then that hit in a short window. Okay, we're going. So that's one thing. I don't want to think that I'm talking about that. Let's put the good thing. This is good, 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 this is good. And not from different places, the same track. Same it. This is good, this is good, this is good. Equals this is great. So that's part of the weighting too. That's part of the weighing of it, I mean.